All right, we are good to go. Again, assalamu alaikum, dear believers. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. On behalf of Imam Tariq I, resident Imam of Masjid Al-Taqwa, and as me, the Talim Committee Chair, Dr. Aisha El-Amin, along with our committee members, Dr. Lionel Allen, Dr. Gloria Bashir, and Brother Shamsuddin Sadiq. I want to welcome you to today's Talim. The format will be a panel discussion with questions and answers. Before I introduce our panel and tell you about our layout of the day, I ask that you please mute yourself if you're not talking so that we don't receive any feedback and that all participants can clearly hear the speaker. Thank you for doing so. Today, I am very honored to be here with you today with a part of our delegation from Masjid Al-Taqwa, our delegation to Mauritania. We have Imam Tariq El-Amin. We have Illinois' first Muslim judge, Naeem Anthony Simpkins, and we have Chicago Tribune's Jazz Artist of the Year, Tammy McCann, and we have myself, Dr. Aisha El-Amin, educator, scholar, and humanitarian. Today we want to tell you about a blessed trip that we had, a humanitarian trip to Mauritania. The format will initially, Imam Tariq will give us about a 5-minute context laying to kind of tell you what Mauritania is, why we went, Abolition Institute, and those kinds of things. Then we'll do a brief slideshow. And it's a slideshow of some pictures, and it's only 30, and we will add to those pictures because Tammy did a series of other things that's not added to this. So the YouTube presentation will have those added so that viewers can view those later. And then Tariq will give a 10-minute, each of us will give a 10-minute talk about specific things that we did on the trip and some of the things that moved us. Tariq will start, Naeem will follow, then Tammy, and I will end. That will give us enough time. We're looking for about 10 minutes of questions and answers. If you can please put your questions and answers in the chat as you go. We will not stop after each person so that we can finish all the presentations. But if you have a question, and I don't want you to forget to put it in the chat and we'll make sure that we get back to it, inshallah. Tariq, if you can start us off, but also give me ability so that I can share screen after you're done. And so we'll get started.
And so before I begin, you do have co-host privileges. So already done.
Thanks.
All right. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So beginning our connection to this particular this cause, this movement, it began actually back in I want to say the beginning or middle of 2014. I was approached by Dr. Harriet Lewis, who was looking for a connection with the masjid that'd be interested in exploring advocacy on behalf of this issue of slavery in Mauritania. And this actually all came about from a CNN documentary done by John Sutter. And you can go to CNN.com to actually see it, Slavery's Last Stronghold, where it illustrated the still existing problem of actual, human slavery. So from that initial meeting, which actually aligned us with not just, it actually aligned us to do some work with Trinity United Church of Christ. Some of you may remember that our drama, Sun Ensemble, drama ensemble, and Trinity United Church of Christ, their drama ministry or theater ministry, put on a play together that Sister Zakia El-Amin wrote and directed, and members from each community that came together, and it was a really wonderful presentation. And then there was a panel discussion afterward, and I believe John Sutter actually was in attendance at that particular discussion. So a bit of fast forwarding. We started off continuing that collaboration to something, an effort that we had called Championing Freedom. And that was, it was primarily isolated to the Masjid Al-Taqwa and Trinity United Church of Christ. And we were looking at some other organizational partners around that issue, bringing people in, just trying to create more awareness amongst the faith communities. Around 20, let's see, was it 20? Actually, in 20, I think it was 2015. And when Naeem picks up the mic, he can correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe around it was either late 2014 or maybe mid 2015. I had asked if Naeem would be willing to, kind of come in and give his expertise and really just kind of run point for us. And I believe that was when Naeem came on. We all, I think around 20, maybe it's like 2017 or so, we were asked to come on to the board. Myself, Naeem, Aisha, and at that point, we began to be a lot more, on the ground, hands in. There's some stuff that I'm not going to mention now, but suffice, I know Naeem is going to mention as far as the city council and things of that nature, that I think we should feel really, really good to be associated with. And then let us see, where are we at now? We're at 2017. The initial delegation that was supposed to go, that was 2017, or was that 2018? You remember? Aisha? Naeem, you all remember?
I think it was 2018, 17. I can't remember.
Yeah, anyway, 2018. But I mean, it was,
our first trip was in 2017.
2017. Okay. So I mean, this really came from some very humble, from very, very humble beginnings. Boubacar Masoud, who is the co-founder of SOS Esclaves, they're one of the leading, well, one of two leading organizations that are fighting slavery in Mauritania. While I was the host of Radio Islam, I had the opportunity to have him in studio and interview him along with Sarah Mathewson and Bakary Tanja, another board member, and also the co-founder of the Abolition Institute, who came in to talk about the efforts and what was going on. Because a lot of times when you say Mauritania, a lot of folks don't even know, where Mauritania is. We're talking about a country. This is a North African country, pretty much right on the tip of Africa. And it serves somewhat as you could say as a bridge. And it's the Islamic Republic of North Africa. And I should say that a part of my involvement, one of the reasons that I was approached and asked to, to come in as a Muslim, as an imam, the Quran, the Hadith, and then the scholarly interpretations of such have been used to legitimize and justify slavery. So it was important to have voices that were pushing back against that type of framing and that type of misuse of Islam and and its creed, its our holy books. So that's one of the things that has been central to to my involvement. While I was there, we had the opportunity to sit down with a group of the leading imams there. The white Arab, there was what they call the white Moors, as well as the Haratine, or which we would basically just kind of consider to be, just African or Black imams, and to talk about the efforts that they were engaged in to push back against, the proliferation of slavery. And one of the big things that came out of it was, because they are in a minority, they are they're pushing back against a they're pushing back against those who misuse those interpretations, the Quran and such, as a way to tell those who are enslaving people that that's their right, that the Africans or blacks, that is their natural state, and they're not doing anything that's that's not in keeping with the Islamic understanding. So those are some really fruitful conversations, and the intention is for us to continue those conversations and actually to bring on more, not just imams, but more Muslim leaders from across the spectrum here in America, here in the United States. As a show of support, but also as a way for us to exchange, because there's a lot of value in the ways that they've responded to this, just horrible and traumatic situation, which really resonates with us in a lot of ways because of our own history here. But they're living it, today as we had to go through it, years and years ago. So it was a really a fruitful conversation. We're here. It's been built up, over time, but I think we're at a point now where we're going to have much more opportunity for participation because we're looking to form deeper connections. And I'll stop right there.
Okay, I'm gonna see if this comes through here. So here's just a few pictures from our time in Mauritania. Of course, there's thousands. Are you able to see?
No.
Nope.
Oh, it says sharing is paused. One second. How about now? You see it?
Nope,
No.
not yet. Still a black screen.
Hmm. Let's see.
Is it started on your end?
It is. It's going on my end. I'm trying to see what is. Okay. We'll try one more time. It's, all right, well, we may not have pictures to share.
Give me a second. I will. You want to move over? Just go on to the next, and I will come up and see if I can take a look at that.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you. Again, we as a delegation were split into multiple groups. And so, and we really do feel like we learned months worth of information in just a few days. And so I'm going to hand the mic over to Anthony Simpkins. I'm also going to put information in the chat for folks to have some more reading that they can do around what's going on in Mauritania.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So yes, starting some years ago, probably 2014, because I think I was on the bench at the time, when Tariq asked me to get involved with this, and we came on the board. And so I wanted to just go over quickly some of the things that we've accomplished over that time. There was definitely a desire to get the masjid involved because of the sort of religious underpinnings of slavery, specifically in Mauritania, sort of an Islamic use of Islam to sort of legitimize slavery and to teach slaves that their status as slaves was something that was sanctioned by Islam, and that to be a good Muslim, they had to be a good slave. And so there have been a couple things that we were able to accomplish over time. There was a mayoral proclamation that was issued in support of IRA and SOS Esclaves and the Mauritanian fight for abolition. There were actually then there were two city council resolutions as well that we were able to get the city council to pass in support of the Mauritanian fight for emancipation and civil rights. As a matter of fact, the leader of one of the main organizations, IRA, Ram Abid, who at one point recently was a presidential candidate in Mauritania and is now a member of the parliament, the first opposition seat in the parliament, by the way, read the first city council resolution out loud and was actually in Mauritania and was actually jailed for that. We also got the Council of Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago to issue a statement on behalf of the 450 Islamic institutions that are member organizations of the CIOGC to applaud a 2015, I think, fatwa by Mauritanian ulama saying that slavery was not consistent with Islam. So to show support of the Muslim community in America for that. And our friends and colleagues in Mauritania say that it's critically important for their movement to see that they are not alone, that they have friends and supporters and allies in America. And they've actually said that, paraphrasing, that Chicago has become sort of the epicenter of support for Mauritanian, the struggle for human rights in Mauritania. We were also able to get successfully lobby for a $5 million continuing appropriation for anti-slavery activities in West Africa, specifically Mauritania, Mali, and Senegal. And when we went on the visit, we actually saw that one of the main groups there, SOS Esclaves, and was able to purchase a building to use as their offices and community center and programming center. So that appropriation has really borne fruit and helped to support a whole panoply of wraparound services that they have for people coming out of slavery, helping them get food and clothing and money and places to live and training for how to open businesses and support themselves, and mental health counseling, a whole panoply of activities that appropriation has been able to support. Dick Durbin was a big ally and really helped to make that happen. And Sean has a long-standing close relationship with Senator Durbin and was really the point person on that. Some of you, so this actually started in the Obama administration, and luckily Donald Trump's administration paid no attention to it. So the appropriation was able to survive the Trump administration. During the Trump administration, there was also, as part of his immigration policies, there was a push to deport Mauritanians that were in the United States as refugees and on temporary visas. And Jan Schakowsky was a big supporter of the push against that. Her and Sean actually went to, can't remember where the epicenter of that was. I think it was maybe Ohio. They actually traveled to Ohio to support the Mauritanian refugees that were fighting against this this new policy to deport them, which of course, with the change of administrations, has been stalled. We've had a number of hits in the media. Our last trip to Mauritania in 2017 got a lot of media coverage, especially in Europe and Africa. Back in Chicago, we did a number of media appearances. We were on a couple appearances on NPR. Tammy helped get us a spot on Jen White's show on NPR, and Aisha and Che and Sean, I think, were on one of these Chicago morning shows. I can't remember which one it is. I'm sure Aisha can tell you that. So that was on television. And so just sort of elevating the conversation, teaching people, highlighting the struggle in Mauritania has been critically important. And I think it actually helped. So one of the biggest things that happened is, as you know, on our first trip to Mauritania, we actually were not allowed in the country. We had made arrangements with the State Department and the embassy and the Mauritanian government, and our delegation was going to go and be welcomed. And then literally, as we were getting on the plane in Paris to fly to Mauritania, we got word that the Prime Minister had decided that they didn't want us there, and we were some kind of a threat to national security and sovereignty, and actually got detained this time around, and got expelled from the country. And we ended up, the whole trip ended up taking place in Dakar, where many of the dissidents actually had to escape the country because the last regime was pretty brutal and murderous. And so many of them were in Dakar. So we were able to touch base with a lot of them while we were there the last time. This go around, one of the very first meetings we had, which was with the Human Rights Commission in Mauritania, they started the meeting by apologizing for detaining us and expelling us the last time. So that's a real sort of 180-degree turn. And the current administration is definitely taking a different tack. And so we, you know, wanted to help them take advantage of this more conciliatory approach that the new government in Mauritania is taking. So this trip, we met with survivors of slavery, people that had escaped slavery and had been helped in their rehabilitation and reintegration through many of the programs of SOS Esclaves, really moving testimonies by them, both men and women, but mostly women. We met with the attorneys that are working on the anti-slavery prosecutions, as Tariq mentioned. We spoke with a number of imams who are working against slavery. Both the main form of slavery in Mauritania is the white Moors enslaving Black Africans, mostly Hautatines.
Well, listen to this.
But there's also some traditional sort of slavery within Black African communities as well. They have sort of a caste system. And so they talked about that as well. And so it's really about fighting against slavery as a traditional institution broadly, though the main form of that is a race-based, descent-based chattel slavery. We met with refugees back in 1989. The former regime expelled something like 80,000 Black Africans. They've been making some efforts to try and sort of make the white Arab minority sort of the majority, if you will, the political majority in the country. So one of those efforts was to expel thousands and thousands of Black Africans. And so we met with some of the refugees. Some of them have been repatriated. They're one of the big issues that SOS Esclaves and IRA are working on is they have this national ID system, and many of the Black Africans, including the slaves and ex-slaves, are not able to get that paperwork, which keeps them from accessing some basic sort of citizen amenities like healthcare and education and cashing paychecks and just really basic stuff, and voting, which is the big deal, right? Because this really is a push to create a white, more voting majority so they can continue to control the politics of the society. And so this is like the main issue that they're dealing with right now. And they're saying that essentially these people are stateless because they can't, they're not really citizens without having the ID paperwork. We met some women that were beneficiaries of some of the work programs that SOS Esclaves is doing. teaching them to make and sell clothing. We had dinner that was catered by one of the ex-slaves that have worked with SOS Esclaves and now has a thriving catering business, for instance. So this is some of the great work that they do. We participated in a couple of press conferences while we were there. They put on this beautiful, just amazing sort of cultural celebration in honor of our delegation being there, which was just unbelievable. And actually Tammy performed at that and was a smash hit. She also performed with a very famous local Mauritanian artist, and that performance just went viral all over the country. And sort of that, Tammy can talk about sort of the cultural exchange, which was a really critical portion of that. Aisha was involved with engagement on the educational front. We got, as part of some of the stuff Tammy was doing, which is, I think, was one of the most important parts of this endeavor, was we actually got to, so we were largely in the center city in Nouakchott, but we also then got a chance to visit one of the neighborhoods of some of the poor folks in Mauritania, and just got to see the reality of how these people live, and it was eye-opening. It was eye-opening. There are levels of poverty in the world that we just can't, I don't think, wrap our brains around, coming from a country as rich as the United States. I think all in all, the feedback we got from our colleagues in Mauritania was that our visit there was productive and successful. And that was the point. Our point was to support the human rights struggle that Mauritanians are doing on behalf of themselves. And from the feedback we got, we were successful in doing that. Inshallah.
Thank you so much. We're going to do a screen share and then go into Tammy.
Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
That first picture was us arriving at, yeah, these are pictures of us arriving at the airport. That's the Mauritanian tea that Tammy fell in love with.
I think we all did. This was right outside of the SOS offices.
These are some of the women that were slavery survivors.
Eating was communal eating. The fish is one of the largest exports. off the mic and Tammy perform that. 1 minute notes that welcomed us into the home.
They fed us like crazy while we're there. Oh, that was on top of the monument, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, there it is. There's the monument.
Monument of the Black family. That's the Grand Mosque in Senegal.
And the goats of the Grand Mosque.
Oh, this was at the Goree Island. It was a working dinner.
And that's the Grand Mosque in full. So those are just a few pictures. Again, we took thousands of pictures, I'm sure, but to give you a glimpse, and I'll turn the microphone over to my dear sister, Tammy.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This experience was definitely transformative. It was such an honor for me to be asked to participate. As my husband, my imam, and my dear sister mentioned, they were given the opportunity to go on this journey back in 2017. And this time, because of the new administration, we were able to broaden our platform and our footprint to include a real cultural vision, you know, and when I say cultural, I mean music and arts based. Thanks to Che Rhymefest, who, just to give you some background, Che is a rapper and humanitarian, Grammy Award winning artist who's written many of the hit songs for Kanye West, as well as the one of the composers for the Oscar winning song, Glory, which was in the movie, which was in the Oscar-winning song Glory. Also, a gentleman who collaborated with us was producer John Trax, who is a Grammy-winning producer and arranger and musician. He has worked with individuals from Kirk Franklin to Sting in every facet of the music industry. And he joined us as a producer for the music. And then, of course, there's myself, and I happen to be currently curator at large for American music for DuSable Museum of African American History. So Che is our leader in this endeavor, and he created a platform through which we could connect all of the musicians of the Black diaspora, so in Africa as well as in America. And he wanted to create a connection with our brothers and sisters that was really authentic and something that wasn't just sampling their music, but actually them sharing with us how the music that we created informed them, and in some cases making us, you know, even change our direction because their influences were so vibrant and so strong. We created music here in Chicago in the studio, and what turned into what initially was going to be one song has now blossomed into an album that's going to be released later this summer. We went from creating some concerts to shooting a full-out music video, which actually was my first. So I was really overwhelmed by and filled with gratitude for being able to participate. The video shoot was done in a neighborhood just maybe 15 minutes away from our very opulent and well-appointed hotel in the downtown city of Nouakchott. It was really fascinating how the two, the lack and the opulence kind of coincided with each other, if you will. 15 minutes away from our hotel was the type of poverty that I must say I've just never experienced before. And those pictures will also be shared on the YouTube, that type of experience, real perspective that I achieved. I think many of us did, seeing what we envisioned to be what I like to call our first world problems, and challenges were really put into perspective when you talk about something as simple as, going to school, going to the grocery store, paved roads, the bathroom. I mean, from the micro to the macro, it was really seen on this trip. Again, we created music in studio, both in Chicago and in Nouakchott and in Dakar. And the collaborations of the musicians were just unbelievable. We have rappers, we have authentic African instrument musicians, we have vocalists. We were even able to connect with a family of griots that in Dakar who had been sharing and collecting historical stories and music over generations of their family. And they shared with us, really gifted to us, their musical collaboration and contribution. When you hear this music, there's really nothing like it that exists currently. We really have tapped into something that is, we think, new and fresh and healing more than anything. It was really important to us that we take that on the strings of this music, you're able to hear a connection, a healing of our two communities, and the story of the struggle of the slaves and former slaves in Mauritania. We wanted to be able to we want to be able to carry their stories around the world and let everyone know of their struggle. The fact that they are actually going through the civil rights struggle and slavery at the same time is really something fascinating. And Imam Tariq and Dr. Aisha were really able to really unpack that in so many different ways. There are so many layers to it. As Naeem mentioned, not just the chattel slavery, but then the actual slavery of Black Africans against other Black Africans. So it's very nuanced. It's not something that is an easy assessment, but the ability to be connected with it and to connect with all of these amazing people in the delegation was something that was really a gift to my life. And we all intend to continue this work and continue to be enlivened and affected by these people's struggle and by their tenacity, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So I'm the last person to speak on the panel. I see there's a few questions. We will answer those questions first, and then folks can also chime in with their questions as well. So part of my journey here as an educator was to understand what education looked like in their context, with the understanding that education is a form of liberation, right? And true liberation cannot be had unless education is part of that. And so we were able to meet with several different groups. And I first saw education bleed through in the programs that they had, and these were just for young women. And let me be clear that it wasn't that men were left out of the conversation, but women were highlighted in a way that we understand as they talk to us, or we understood it in a very different context. So women could not easily escape slavery. And they still have women that are enslaved. From one of the Mauritanians said that men, they could leave, you know, it wouldn't be easy, but usually the master wouldn't chase after them, right? He wouldn't go after them with the same fervor. The reason that they went after women, and not only went after women, but went after their children even after they escaped, is because that is how to keep slavery going. It is through the womb, because that's how slavery is passed down. If your mom was a slave, then you're a slave. And so a woman could continue that legacy. And so in order to continue that legacy, the protection and the liberation of women is essential. We saw that in a cultural night where they had a woman's only, it was for women, by women, but it didn't have any specific lyrics or rhythm, right? You're talking about freedom. The expression of freedom, even through song. We saw it in the training programs where we saw them becoming cosmetologists and making scarves so they could be entrepreneurs. Each of them had mini grants that were given to them to start their businesses after training, right? And so this not only liberated them economically, right? But it also, out of all the women that I spoke to, the number one thing that they said that they did as entrepreneurs is to pay for tuition for their children, right? And so that brings us back again to education. And to lay a context for education, I was able to speak to education leaders. And in the room, it was myself, another member of the delegation who's a Spanish teacher here. So it was four of us, but all of us were women from the United States educators, and all of them. Most of you, it's a very high rate of women in the United States as educators. And so we were a little bit taken back, but when you know the statistics that only 55% of the girls in Mauritania are illiterate. And part of this is because young girls cannot move about without companions and alone. So even getting to school in these very rural areas is really a challenge. They told us why first of all, a lot of girls were not, and some of it was travel, but another is, especially in the rural areas, that girls get married very young, so 10 or 12 years old. And the expectation is that they don't leave outside of the home, not for work, not for school. Everything that they need is within inside the home. They said that this is changing, this understanding is changing, right? Because when you have come from slavery, and that's what women, seeing women in a different light, is psychological. We see some of the psychological things that we're enduring from slavery, and they on books eliminated slavery in the 1980s, right? And even as we've learned, and I know Naeem can speak to this even more, they have all their judges are white Moors and all their lawyers. So it is a challenge when you have something on the books, just like we know Boer versus Roe, right? It's one thing to have it on the books, and it's another to have it implemented. What we found out from them was there are schools, about 16% students go to private schools and the tuition-based ones. But the public schools are something that are looked at upon as the worst thing that you can do for your child for education. They have up to 200 students per classroom. They have no water or electricity in many of these spaces, and no tables or chairs or no books. And so if you think about, you know, our context where we're like, is it 30 students in this class? Are you serious? And there's books and there's air conditioning, there's buildings and there's, you know, just take that and multiply it, right? And then you see those conditions. But even beyond that, they have unemployment is on par whether you have up to a high school education or not, right? And so it's kind of like, why send them to school? Why save up all this money or send them to this public school when they can be doing work? Because they will have the same possibility as a Black Mauritania or Black, same as they did if they were not in school. And so this unemployment piece, and we, again, as African Americans here in this country with always the highest rate of unemployment, we understand this, right? We understand it in minute ways, and they understand in much broader ones. Another thing was, and I wrote this down as a quote. One of the educators says, to be honest with you, we have a poverty of imagination. We have only seen what we have seen, right? We don't get what you all are saying, right? Our girls, they don't understand. They like to see you as an educated woman is something that they're not used to seeing, right? And we know that representation counts. We know that having the first Black president makes a difference. We know that having someone that looks like you at the front of the classroom makes a difference. And so what he said is that our imagination has not even allowed us to go there yet, right? And so for me, that really hit home. And so I plan on continuing to have conversations with them and seeing how I can support those students. It takes, the teachers there are paid $240 per month in order to, you know, and they said that's not enough to feed their families. That's not enough. So you will have 200 students that show up to a public school and you will not have a teacher that shows, because they can actually earn better money out in the streets, you know, selling goods. So it's not one of those professions that's looked at as something. So it's systemic is what I want to say. And I can go on and on, but I do want to leave some time, because we're close to our time, to answer some of your questions. And I see Brother Rye, you have several questions. If I'll give you the mic so that you can ask your questions if you like. And then as a panel, we can all kind of chime in.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So I don't want to take up the time, but my first question is, you know, slavery has existed throughout the history of mankind, and historically, in African nations, slaves were usually captives of war. Imam Tariq addressed some of this on Friday. I know of African Americans who refused to travel to Africa because Africans participated in the slave trade, although they had no idea of the kind of slavery Europeans had in mind. How do you address this attitude among our people in this country who take that position? And the second question is, how did the Abolition Institute delegation feel free, feel that they could express themselves freely in Mauritania?
I guess I'll take part of that question. The first part was, you said some African Americans will not visit Africa because they feel like there were Africans who were involved in the slave trade. Well, I mean, you know, that's an interesting logic. You know, we find ourselves victims to violence from people who look like us right here at home. Yet, you know, we continue to, we haven't written off each other completely, or some of us have. But I mean, that's, you know, I think, you know, if people feel that way, everybody's entitled to how they feel. I think, you know, the point you mentioned, is that yes, there were Africans who profited from the slave trade, just as there were Arabs who profited from it and continue to engage in the practice. But slavery, I think I ended simply with this. One of the things that was told to us in the Imam's meeting, which was slavery is not an African problem or even an Arab problem. It's a human phenomenon. And when you look at it within that context, you don't localize it. So I think that's what's important to know with regard to that. I'll leave some room for everybody else.
I'd like to add something as well.
Uh-huh.
I think that having a notion about how someone feels about the historic connection of our historic connection, right? So going to Africa, I was able to have a conversation with a young man who shared with me about this collective guilt, this collective weight that Africans have about their ancestors playing a role and how they unpack that and how they feel about that, right? In comparison to the way that our country feels about what they did to us. So I think that the perception, having the perception of how people feel about what they did to us can only be explored if you go and have the conversation. You can stay here in America and have your opinion, or you can go over there and start talking with your brothers about how they feel about it, you know?
Absolutely. I see we have Brother Bill has a question in the chat. I'll speak to that one and allow any other panelists. And then Brother Bashir, we'll bring in our last question. I do see your hand up and we'll respond to that as our round off question. And your question, Bill, is how do people become slaves by, is it by birth or race or poverty? It's kind of like ours was here, right? And so it's the black Mauritanians, the Moors, being enslaved by, and again, there's some complexities here, but the majority, it was race-based, but and passed down. So if your mom was a slave, then you are a slave. And so it's race and lineage.
Yeah, the Mauritanian, as far as we can tell, the Mauritanian society, and there's lots of different subcultures. We met with some Solinke, and there's lots of different cultures, but it's definitely hereditary, and it's also sort of caste-based. Like in India, they have the untouchables. I mean, slaves are like a social caste. And so you're born into that caste and you can't sort of get yourself out of that caste. Now, we met ex-slaves who, I mean, Bahram is, well, I mean, his parents were slaves. He technically was not born a slave. But he's a member of parliament. We met ex-slaves, lawyers. But for the most part, that's the caste that you're born into.
All right, and Brother Bashir? Brother Bashir, do you have a question?
Well, maybe he stepped away.
Yeah, we're not able to hear you. And we are at time. We are at time right now at 2 o'clock. On behalf of the panel here, in behalf of Masjid Al-Taqwa Committee, I thank you all for being here. I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channal, Masjid Al-Taqwa, so that you can see this and all of our Jumas and other Taleems. May Allah continue to bless us and guide us. And if you want to hear more about this work and get involved, please visit stoppingslavery.org for more information. Assalamu alaikum.